Evan walked along the edge of the alien river, enjoying the quiet evening. But something felt wrong in the air. The sky looked peaceful, the wind was soft, yet the river sounded too loud, almost angry. He stopped and listened again, and that is when he heard a scream. It was high and sharp, the scream of a child. Before he could move, another sound followed, a deep growl mixed with a panicked cry. Evan ran toward the noise without thinking, his heart beating hard as he pushed through tall blue grass. When he reached the riverbank, his entire body froze for 1 second. A tiny alien child was trapped in the wild red current, her small arms hitting the water as she tried to stay up. Right beside her, a young alien leopard struggled too, its spotted fur washed with red water. Both of them were caught in the turning waves. Both of them were drowning. Villagers stood far away on the rocks, shouting warnings but not helping. They were scared of the red current, a dangerous cycle of water that pulled down anything that entered it. Evan shouted at them, asking why no one was doing anything. But they only shouted back that touching the red current meant death even for strong warriors. No one dared to go near it, no one except Evan. He did not wait. He jumped into the river without fear. The cold hit him like a heavy slap. The current pulled him down so fast that he barely got his head up again. He fought the water, kicking hard to move closer to the child and the leopard. The child's eyes were wide with fear, glowing faint blue under the water. The alien leopard tried to roar, but only water came out. Evan reached for the child's hand, but the current pushed her away like she was a leaf. He tried again, stretching his arm as far as he could. His fingers hit her wrist for a second, then slipped. The water spun him, throwing him under again. When he came up, he saw the leopard closer now, its claws hitting the water, trying to get to the child. Evan turned toward the animal, and the leopard turned toward him. For a brief moment they understood one thing. They were both trying to save the small one. Evan reached for the leopard first, grabbing its wet fur and pulling. The animal fought the water with him, using its strong legs to kick. Together they moved toward the child before she disappeared under the surface again. Evan dived deep, his lungs burning, his hands reaching blindly in the dark water. He felt a small shoulder brush his arm. He grabbed it tight and kicked upward with all his strength. The child broke the surface first, gasping for air. Evan held her with one arm while the leopard swam beside them, trying to help. But the river was not finished with them yet. The current pulled them toward the deeper part. The water spun them again, and Evan felt his strength fading. He tried to move the child to the shore, but the river was stronger than he expected. The leopard growled desperately, trying to climb against the current. For a moment, it looked like all three would be swallowed again. Villagers shouted louder, telling Evan to let go, or the river would take him too. But he held the child even tighter. He refused to let her go. He refused to fail. He pushed forward one more time. The leopard clawed at a rock and found a grip. Evan felt hope. With the leopard's help, he moved the child toward the edge. The villagers finally stepped closer, pulling the child out of the water. Evan tried to climb out as well, placing his hand on the rock. The leopard climbed up beside him, shaking water off its body. Evan smiled in relief for a second, thinking it was finally over. But then he felt something cold touch his ankle under the water. He looked down and saw nothing. But he could feel it, a pull, slow and strong, as if a hand made of water was wrapping around his leg. The villagers screamed for him to hurry. Evan grabbed the rock with both hands, trying to pull himself up. The leopard turned and growled at the river, as if it saw something he could not. The child cried and tried to reach for Evan, but the villagers held her back. Evan pulled harder, but the thing under the water pulled harder too, dragging him back inch by inch. The river was not done with him. Something inside it wanted him to stay, and as his fingers slipped from the rock, the water rose over his shoulders again, pulling him into the deep red current. Evan's last breath was filled with cold water as everything went dark, and the villagers shouted his name, certain he would never come back out of that deadly river. Evan woke with a violent cough, water rushing out of his lungs as he lay on the riverbank. The world spun around him, and for a moment he thought he was still. Drowning, his fingers dug into the wet ground, trying to hold on to something real. When the cold air finally filled his chest again, he looked up and saw two shapes beside him, the tiny alien child he saved, and the young alien leopard standing guard like a loyal protector, both watching him with wide eyes, both alive because of him. The villagers stood far behind them, whispering. In fear instead of coming close, Evan tried to sit up, but the child quickly placed her small hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, almost glowing. She looked scared for him, her eyes shimmering with strange symbols inside them, symbols he had never seen before. The leopard lowered its head toward Evan, sniffing him as if checking if he was still breathing. Properly, Evan smiled weakly and raised a hand to touch the animal's head, but the leopard moved even closer, pressing its forehead gently against his shoulder. As if thanking him for saving its life, the villagers gasped. Shocked that the beast treated Evain like a chosen companion, the village elder slowly approached with hesitation, his long robes brushing the ground. He kept a safe distance but did not hide his fear. He pointed at the child and said the words that made Evan freeze. She's not supposed to be alive after falling into the red current. The elder explained that the child was no normal child. She belonged to the Moon Pride, a rare and royal tribe that lived deep in the mountains. Her kind were born with markings of starlight on their skin and were protected by powerful laws. If someone interfered with the fate of a Moon Pride heir, the punishment could be death or worse. Evan stared at the child again, noticing how the symbols on her skin glowed brighter whenever she looked at him. She whispered her name softly, Leary, her voice shaky but full of trust. She took Evan's hand with both of hers, holding it tightly as if she did not want to lose him. The leopard circled around them, growling softly at anyone who came too close. Evan asked the villagers why they did not help, why they let a child and an animal drown. The elder answered with a heavy voice, "The red current is cursed. Anything it takes is marked for the dead. Saving them breaks the old rule, and breaking old rules invites danger." Evan looked around confused, wondering what kind of danger could be worse than letting a child drown, but the villagers refused to speak more. Instead, they backed away as Leary and the leopard stayed close to him like they belonged beside him. Evan tried to stand again, but his legs shook. Leary immediately moved under his arm to help him, even though she was small. The leopard pushed its body against his side to keep him steady. Evan laughed breathlessly, surprised how these two trusted him completely after only minutes together. And that trust made the villagers even more frightened. As the sun began to set, the forest around them started to whisper with strange sounds. Leary suddenly stiffened. Her small hands trembled. She whispered that someone was coming. Someone from her tribe. Evan looked toward the mountains and saw nothing at first. But the leopard's ears rose sharply, and it lowered its body as if preparing to defend. Then the air changed. A deep humming sound rolled across the land. The ground vibrated gently under their feet. A shadow passed overhead, and a massive ship shaped like a curved silver blade descended toward the village. The villagers ran and hid behind their huts, shouting warnings for Evan to run. But he could not leave Leary. She held his arm tighter as the ship landed with a heavy thud. Dust rising all around it, armored figures stepped out from the glowing doors, each taller than any human, their helmets shaped like moons, their armor shining with blue energy. They moved in perfect formation, silent and powerful. When they saw Leary beside Evan, they stopped. Their leader stepped forward. Pointing a long silver spear at Evan's chest, he spoke in a cold voice, asking how a human dared to interfere with sacred fate. He demanded they take Leary away and punish the outsider who touched her. Leary cried out and ran to Evan, hugging him tightly, refusing to leave. The leopard roared loudly, standing between Evan and the warriors, as if it would die protecting him. The warriors raised their weapons, but before they could move, Leary's markings began to glow. Brighter than the river, brighter than the sunset, A beam of soft blue light wrapped around Evan and the leopard. The warriors stepped back in shock, their leader's voice shaking now. He whispered the ancient words only Moonpride knew. Leary had chosen Evan. She had placed a bond of protection on him, something that had not happened in centuries. Harming Evan now would bring disaster to their entire tribe. The leader lowered his spear slowly, fear spreading across his face, and the warriors watched the human with wide eyes, realizing he was no longer just an outsider. He was now marked by their heir self. The air around the village grew heavy as the Moonpride warriors stood in a circle around Evan, Leary, and the leopard, their armor shining like cold moonlight, their eyes hidden behind silver helmets. The ground under Evan's feet felt as if it was waiting for something to happen, something bigger than all of them. The leader of the warriors raised his spear again, not to attack, but to examine the glowing bond wrapped softly around Evan's body. The blue light shimmered like a living thing, and the warriors whispered nervously. Afraid of touching it, Leary held Evan's hand tightly, her small fingers shaking. She hid half behind him as if he could protect her from soldiers twice her size. The leopard stood in front of both of them, teeth bared, its tail stiff, ready to strike at anyone who came close. The villagers watched from behind broken walls and wooden huts, some in shock, none understanding why a simple human would be standing against one of the most feared tribes on the planet. Evan felt their eyes on him but did not move. He only bent slightly to whisper to Leary, asking if she was all right. She nodded but did not let go of him. The Moonpride leader finally moved, stepping closer. He pressed the tip of his spear against the glowing bond and instantly pulled back as if burned. The blue light flashed in warning. The leader's voice shook when he spoke again. He said that Leary had done something forbidden by her own people. She had used the bond of protection, a sacred symbol meant only for warriors or chosen family. Using it on an outsider was unheard of. Using it on a human was unthinkable. The warriors lowered their heads, understanding the danger now. The bond was alive, and it had accepted Evan fully. Evan did not understand everything, but he could feel Leary's hand gripping his, as if letting go would break her. The leader ordered the warriors to retrieve Leary and remove the human carefully. But when two soldiers stepped forward, the bond flared again, brighter and hotter. The ground cracked at their feet, pushing them back. The warriors stared at Evan as if he was holding a weapon they could not fight. Evan felt none of the power himself. He only felt Leary's fear and the leopard's growl getting deeper, sharper, ready to defend him at all cost. The leader removed his helmet slowly, revealing pale silver skin and tired eyes. He walked toward Evan without his weapon raised. He spoke softly now, asking Evan how he saved Leary from the red current. Evan answered simply, saying he could not watch a child drown. The leader looked confused, as if this answer made no sense to him. He turned to his warriors and said humans did not understand destiny. They broke rules without fear. They acted on emotion instead of law, and that was why they created chaos wherever they walked. The warriors nodded, blaming Evan for something he did not even know existed. Leary stepped forward suddenly, her voice louder and stronger than before. She declared that Evan saved her because he had a good heart, and that she chose him because she trusted him more than anyone. Her words made the warriors freeze. The leader's eyes widened. He whispered to himself that the heir had spoken truth in full claim, something that bound all Moonpride warriors by ancient rule. Evan felt the weight of those words but stayed silent. Leary squeezed his hand again. The leopard sat at his feet like a shadow of protection. The leader finally gave an order, one that shocked the whole village. He said Evan must be taken to the Moonpride camp immediately, for his fate was now tied to theirs. The villagers gasped, afraid of what would happen to the human. Evan looked at Leary. She looked back with both fear and hope. The leopard brushed against his leg as if telling him not to worry. The warriors formed a path, their armor humming softly as they bowed their heads to Leary, accepting her choice even if they did not like it. But before they could move, another Sound echoed from the forest, a deep rumble that made even the warriors step back. The leopard's ears shot up. Its fur rising high, it growled at the shadows. The leader raised his spear again, shouting for everyone to stay alert. The sound came again, louder, closer, shaking leaves from the trees. Evan felt Leary hide behind him again, her small body trembling as the air grew colder. The warriors formed a defensive circle around them, their armor lighting up with blue energy. Something huge moved between the trees, something with heavy steps that made the earth vibrate. The leader whispered. One name, a name that made the warriors grip their weapons in fear: the Dark Ridge Hunter. A creature that even Moon Pride warriors avoided fighting. A creature known for stealing royal heirs in the night. Evan felt his heart pound harder, not from fear for himself, but fear that this creature had been tracking Leary since the river. Forest went silent for one breath, then the creature roared, shaking the river, shaking the sky. And in that moment, Evan understood that saving Leary had opened a door to something far more dangerous than he imagined. The forest shook as the Dark Ridge Hunter moved closer, its heavy steps breaking branches like dry sticks. The Moon Pride warriors tightened their formation, their blue armor humming louder as the symbols on their chest plates glowed in warning. Evan stood in the center of the circle with Leary and the young leopard, trying to keep calm, but his heart pounded like a drum. Leary clutched his arm with both hands, her small body trembling with fear. The leopard stood in front of them, teeth bared, claws digging into the dirt, ready to protect its chosen family. The leopard stood in front of them, teeth bared, claws digging into the dirt, ready to protect its chosen family. Creature roared again, a deep and chilling sound that echoed across the mountains. The warriors shouted commands, forming a shield wall, but even they looked nervous. Evan asked what the creature wanted, and the leader answered with a tight voice. The Dark Ridge Hunter steals royal heirs and feeds on their glowing life force. It had followed Leary since she fell into the red current. The creature wanted her because she was weak, afraid, and alone. But now she was not alone. She stood beside a human who refused to let go, and a guardian leopard who would die for her. The trees parted slowly, and the creature stepped into the open, its body huge, black scales shining like oil, 6 legs moving like a giant spider, and glowing red eyes locked on Leary. The warriors raised their spears, but the creature ignored them, its attention fixed only on the child. Leary hid behind Evan, her markings glowing softly as if trying to shield her. The leopard growled so loudly, even the warriors stepped back. Evan placed his hand on the leopard's back, feeling its muscles shaking with rage and fear, but he also felt intelligence in its eyes. The leader shouted for the warriors to attack, but the creature moved too fast, sweeping its massive tail and throwing the warriors aside like toys. Their armor sparked as they hit the ground. The leader shouted again, ordering them to regroup, but the Dark Ridge Hunter leapt over them, landing right in front of Evan. The ground cracked under its weight. Its hot breath brushed against his face. Evan stepped in front of Leary, raising his arms even though he had no weapon. The leopard jumped between them, roaring with all its strength, its fur glowing faintly with a strange silver light. The creature hesitated for a moment, sniffing the leopard, then it growled in confusion. The leader gasped when he saw the glow. He shouted that the young leopard was not an ordinary animal. It was a Moon Pride guardian beast, bred and trained to protect heirs from birth. Every heir was given one, but Leary was too young to bond yet. The beast was still learning, still growing, still finding its true master. But the moment Evan saved its life, it bonded to him instead of Leary. This changed everything. Guardian beasts only obey their chosen master fully, and now that master was a human, Leary looked up at Evan with wide eyes, whispering shakily that the beast was meant to protect her one day. But now it had chosen him. The warriors exchanged fearful glances, knowing this broke their sacred order. The leader said Evan's connection to Leary and the guardian beast created a strange new bond, a bond that even the Dark Ridge Hunter could sense. The creature stepped back slightly, confused by the strength coming from the human and the beast. Together, Leary's glow wrapped around both of them, linking them like threads of light. The hunter roared in anger, trying to break the bond by force. It attacked again, striking the ground, sending dust and rocks flying. The leopard leapt forward. Clawing at its legs, Evan shouted as the beast fought with all its strength. Leary cried out, holding her glowing hands close to her chest, her markings flashing brighter each time the leopard struck. The leader ordered the warriors to assist, but the creature knocked them down again with its powerful limbs. The forest ground shook with each blow. Evan saw the leopard weakening, its breaths sharp, its legs trembling. He knew it could not fight alone. He stepped forward, grabbing a broken spear from the ground. Even though he had no idea how to use it, he faced the creature, feeling fear climb up his spine, but he refused to move back. The leopard limped beside him, still ready to fight. Leary raised her glowing hands, whispering ancient words Evan could not understand. A soft blue light spread around him, making his body lighter, stronger, faster. The dark ridge hunter lunged again. Its jaws wide, Evan moved on instinct, dodging. Faster than he thought possible, he struck the spear against its leg. The creature screamed in pain as the guardian leopard launched itself at its head. Both human and beast working together without speaking, the warriors finally joined in, pushing the creature toward the river. The leopard clawed at its face, and the warriors struck with their spears. The creature toppled backward, falling into the red water. The river spun around it, dragging it under as it roared in rage. Bubbles rose, then silence. The dark ridge hunter was gone, drowned by the same current that almost took Leary and the leopard earlier. Evan stood shaking, breathing hard, covered in dust and scratches. The leopard pressed against his leg, exhausted but alive. Leary ran to him and hugged him tightly, her markings glowing in relief. The warriors stared at Evan with new eyes, no longer seeing a simple outsider, but a human who fought beside a guardian beast and saved their heir from a creature even they feared. But in the distance, more shadows moved between the trees, and the leader whispered that this was only the beginning of the danger caused by the broken rules. The forest grew silent after the dark ridge hunter disappeared under the red current. But the silence did not feel peaceful. It felt heavy, warning, as if something else was watching from deep inside the trees. Evan stood with Leary and the exhausted leopard beside him. The Moon Pride warriors slowly forming a protective circle again. Their armor cracked from the earlier battle, their breaths unsteady. Even the leader looked shaken. He whispered that the hunter did not hunt alone. Where one appeared, more would follow soon. Evan felt Leary's hand tighten around his arm, her markings flickering with fear. The leader signaled his warriors to lift their fallen and regroup. He ordered them to prepare for evacuation, not for themselves but for Leary and Evan. The bond between them made Evan a target for creatures that fed on life force. The glowing link around his body was like a bright trail for monsters hiding in the mountains. Evan asked why the bond attracted danger, and the leader answered with a grave tone. The bond of protection was powerful, but it burned like a lantern in the dark, showing enemies exactly where its holder stood. Leary looked down sadly, blaming herself, but Evan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, telling her she did nothing wrong. The warriors marched toward the village edge, trying to move Leary quickly. But the leopard refused to leave Evan's side, limping but alert, its eyes scanning every shadow. The leader noticed the beast's behavior and frowned. He told Evan the leopard was not just protecting Leary, it was protecting him too, and that made the situation even more dangerous. Guardian beasts were rare and deeply valued. Losing one was a loss that could start wars. Gaining one without permission was even worse. It made Evan look less like a friend and more like a thief in the eyes of the Moon Pride Council. But there was no time to argue. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the strange smell, a mix of ash and cold earth. The warriors froze. The leader lifted his spear and shouted a warning. Something was moving through the forest again. Evan pulled Leary closer. The leopard stepped forward with a low growl. The trees shook as a shape appeared between them. Not as big as the Dark Ridge hunter, but faster, thinner, and more aggressive. Its many glowing eyes blinked in different directions. Searching for weakness, the warriors raised their shields, but the creature darted past them, heading straight. For Evan and Leary, the leopard launched itself at the creature, colliding with it mid-air, both rolling across the ground. Claws tearing through dirt and leaves. Leary cried out, her markings glowing brighter. Evan grabbed a long branch, ready to strike if the creature broke free. The beast hissed, its body twisting unnaturally, but the leopard clung to it with fierce determination. The leader shouted for his warriors to help, but before they could reach the fight, another roar echoed from behind them. Another creature approached from the other side. Then another. The forest was alive with shadows, glowing eyes everywhere. The leader shouted that the hunter was only the first. The others had smelled Leary's fear when she fell into the river. They wanted her power. They wanted the light inside her. The warriors fought hard, pushing back one creature after another. But more kept coming. Evan swung the branch at a creature that tried to crawl toward Leary, hitting it again and again until it fled. His arms burned, his breath short. But he refused to step back. Leary hid behind him, whispering shaky words that made the bond around Evan glow stronger. The leader stared in shock, realizing Leary was strengthening him on purpose. The leopard finally threw the first beast aside. But its own wounds were deep. Blood stained its fur. Evan knelt beside it, whispering encouragement, but the leopard pushed its head into his hand. Refusing to give up, refusing to stop protecting, more creatures appeared, their glowing eyes circling the warriors like wolves around prey. The leader realized they could not win this fight. He ordered immediate retreat to the high cliffs nearby, a place the creatures feared because of ancient moon pride traps hidden in the rocks. Evan lifted Leary into his arms, holding her close as she trembled. The leopard limped beside him, still ready to attack anything moved. The warriors formed a shield around them as they ran toward the cliffs, creatures chasing behind them. Some leaping from trees, others crawling on the ground like shadows made of bone and teeth. The leader shouted for everyone to keep moving, no matter what they heard behind them. Evan looked back once and saw the forest alive with monsters, dozens of them pouring out of the dark. Chasing Leary's light, the group reached the base of the cliffs, but the path upward was narrow and dangerous. The warriors pushed Evan and Leary forward, telling them to climb fast. The creatures were almost upon them. The leopard roared, standing between Evan and the approaching wave of beasts. The leader shouted the final warning. If they did not reach the highest point, the traps would not activate. Evan placed Leary on his back and climbed, his arms shaking, his breath rough. Below him the leopard fought desperately, the warriors forming a wall around it. The creatures climbed the rocks like insects, getting closer. Evan reached the final ledge and pulled Leary over it. The leader shouted for the traps to activate, and ancient symbols carved into the cliff began to glow. The rock shook. A blast of bright silver light exploded outward, forcing the creatures back, burning their glowing eyes. But just before the explosion fully stopped them, Evan saw something terrifying in the shadows, something far bigger than the hunter, something watching quietly, as if waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He realized the true danger had not revealed itself yet. The silver explosion from the cliff traps lit up the night like lightning. Creatures screamed as the light burned their glowing eyes, their bodies twisting away in agony. Evan held Leary close as the wind from the blast roared past them. The leopard collapsed beside him, exhausted and hurt, but still pushing itself up with trembling legs. The Moon Pride warriors gathered near the ledge, their armor cracked, their bodies bruised, yet every one of them still ready to fight if needed. The leader stood at the front, staring down the cliff at the forest below. When the smoke cleared, the forest floor was filled with shadows crawling back into the trees, but they were not retreating from fear. They were only waiting, watching, planning. The leader's eyes narrowed as he saw movement deeper in the woods. Something far bigger than the creatures they fought earlier. Something heavy, silent, and patient. Evan followed his gaze and felt cold fear slide down his spine. Leary's markings flickered weakly as she clung to him, whispering that the real threat had not shown itself yet. The earlier creatures were only scouts, only hunters sent ahead. The warriors formed a defensive circle around Evan and Leary again. The leader ordered them to prepare for one more attack. He spoke in a low voice, saying the creature hiding in the dark was older than the tribe's history, older than the mountains, a predator that even the old Moon Pride ancestors feared. Evan swallowed hard, his hands shaking, but Leary gently held his wrist, her markings glowing as soft blue light. The bond around his body responded, warming his skin, filling him with strength he did not understand. Evan felt his heartbeat slow, his fear fading as something stronger replaced it. The ground trembled suddenly. Stones rolled down the cliffs, and leaves flew into the air. The leader shouted for everyone to ready weapons. The shaking grew louder, heavier. Every warrior raised their spear. The leopard growled and forced itself to stand, its fur bristling as it limped beside Evan. Evan placed a hand on its head, whispering that he needed it one more time. The leopard leaned its head into his palm, as if saying it would follow him, even to death. A massive shadow rose from the forest, taller than trees, its shape unclear in the dark, but its presence felt like a living nightmare. The warriors gasped. Leary hid behind Evan again, clutching his clothes with both hands. The leader whispered that the Ridge Sovereign had arrived, the ancient king of the hunters. The creature let out a roar so loud the cliffs shook. Small rocks fell like rain, and even the river far below rippled violently. Evan felt his knees weaken, but the bond's glow held him steady, spreading over him and the leopard like a shield. The Sovereign stepped forward, its long limbs moving with deadly grace, its eyes glowing brighter than any creature before it. The warriors attacked first, peers glowing blue as they charged. But the Sovereign barely moved. One swipe of its limb sent 3 warriors flying into the rocks, armor breaking like glass. Evan shouted for them to fall back, but they did not listen. They were trained to die protecting their heir. They fought bravely, but the creature was too strong, too old, too smart. The Sovereign suddenly turned its gaze toward Leary. The air grew cold. Leary gasped, stepping back. In fear, the bond around Evan burst with bright blue light, connecting him to her. The Sovereign raised one massive limb and struck it toward them. Evan did not think. He moved instinctively, pushing Leary behind him. The leopard leapt with a roar, slashing the air, but the creature knocked the beast away with a single blow. Evan felt rage explode inside him. He grabbed a spear from a fallen warrior and charged. His body moved faster than any human should, the bond giving him speed and strength beyond natural limits. He dodged the creature's limbs by inches, his feet barely touching the ground. He struck at the Sovereign's leg, the spear glowing bright as he hit it. The creature screamed, its roar shaking the mountains. The warriors watched in shock as Evan fought like a burning flame, fearless, fast, and unstoppable. The leader shouted that the bond was amplifying him, making him a weapon the Sovereign had never seen before. Evan kept attacking, dodging, striking, moving in ways that felt impossible. Leary raised her glowing hands, whispering ancient words that fed more power into the bond. The blue light around Evan grew brighter. The Sovereign roared again, shaking the cliff. The creature swung its massive limb, hitting Evan and throwing him across the ledge. He rolled hard but pushed himself up again, refusing to stay down. Leary cried out his name, her markings glowing painfully bright. The bond shook violently. Responding to her fear, the Sovereign lunged forward, aiming to crush them both. But the leopard leapt again, its last strength thrown into one final attack. Claws shining with silver energy, it struck the Sovereign's face, giving Evan the opening he needed. He charged, screaming with all his strength, and drove the spear straight into the Sovereign's eye. The creature roared, thrashing wildly. The warriors pulled Evan back as the Sovereign stumbled, slipping off the cliff. falling into the darkness below, its roar echoing until it finally disappeared. Silence fell over the cliffs. Evan collapsed to his knees. The leopard lay beside him, barely breathing. Leary threw her arms around him, crying in relief. The leader stared at Evan in awe, whispering that no human had ever fought like that. But before he could say more, the ground shook again, a deep rumble rising from under the earth. Something even older than the sovereign was awakening in the dark below. The real nightmare had just begun. The cliffs trembled as the deep rumble grew louder, dust falling from the rocks like drifting sand. The Moonpride warriors looked around, in panic, believing a new monster had awoken beneath them. Leary held Evan's arm tightly, her markings glowing weakly. The leopard lay beside them, barely breathing, its chest rising and falling with slow, painful movements. The leader raised his spear again, shouting for the warriors to hold their ground until they understood what was coming. Evan stood up, shaking but determined. He placed himself in front of Leary and the wounded leopard, ready to fight again if he had to. But the ground slowly stopped shaking. The deep rumble changed to a soft hum, and the cliffs grew quiet. The leader frowned, lowering his spear slightly. The warriors tightened their grip, but did not attack. The silence stretched until a sound broke it. Not a roar, not a growl, but the soft sound of wind. The hum grew. Brighter and blue lights began rising from the cracks in the stone. Leary gasped and stepped forward, whispering that the ancient guardians were waking. Not monsters, but protectors of the Moonpride bloodline. Protectors that only came when a true heir was in danger. The blue lights formed shapes, tall figures made of glowing dust and ancient energy. They lifted their heads toward the sky, their bodies almost transparent. The warriors knelt instantly, their armor clinking as they bowed their heads. The leader fell to one knee, whispering that the ancestors had awakened for the heir. Evan stood frozen, unsure if he should bow. But Leary took his hand and guided him gently to kneel beside her. The leopard raised its head weakly, watching the glowing figures with silent respect. One of the ancient guardians stepped forward, its form drifting like smoke, yet solid enough to touch the ground. It towered over Evan, looking down at him with eyes that held ages of memory. The guardian raised its hand and touched the bond around Evan. The blue light swirled brighter, reacting to the ancient energy. The warriors watched in awe as the guardian spoke in a soft voice that echoed like wind through a cave. It said the bond had chosen a protector with a heart strong enough to break old limits. A protector who acted not from law but from pure instinct to save a child. The leader looked confused but listened silently. The guardian explained that the bond did not care about species. It cared only about intention, courage, and sacrifice. And Evan had shown all three when he jumped into the river with no hesitation, when he stood against the hunters, and when he fought the sovereign with his bare hands and a broken spear. Leary squeezed Evan's hand, tears in her glowing eyes. The warriors bowed their heads deeper, accepting the ancient truth they could not deny. Then the guardian turned to the wounded leopard, lifting its hand again. A gentle blue glow covered the beast, healing its broken bones, closing its wounds, and restoring its strength. The leopard stood slowly, looking stronger than before. It pressed its head against Evan's leg, showing loyalty more clearly than any words. The warriors gasped as they realized the guardian beast had fully accepted its new master, something that had never happened with an outsider in the history of the Moonpride. The leader stood up slowly, his expression filled with conflict. He stepped toward Evan and looked him in the eyes. He said tradition demanded that guardians and heirs only bond within the tribe. And Evan's presence broke many rules, but the ancestors themselves had spoken, and no one could stand against their decision. He turned to the warriors and declared that Evan was now under royal protection, not as a prisoner, but as a chosen guardian. The warriors lowered their weapons, accepting the truth even if they did not fully understand it. Leary stepped forward, placing her small hand on Evan's arm. She looked at the warriors with surprising strength in her voice. She said Evan saved her life, protected her from fear, and gave her hope when she was alone. She declared him her protector fully, not just by accident, but by choice. Her markings glowed bright again, lighting up the cliffs. The warriors bowed deeply to Evan, as if he were now part of their royal duty. Evan felt overwhelmed, unsure what to say, but Leary smiled softly, pulling him closer as if he belonged beside her. The ancient guardians slowly faded back into dust, their mission complete. The cliffs trembled once more, and then fell silent forever. The leader approached Evan again, offering him a place in the Moonpride tribe. A home, a rank, and a future where he would be honored as a protector of the royal heir. Evan shook his head gently. He did not want power or titles. He asked only for one thing: safety for Leary and the guardian Leopard. A life where they would never be hunted again. The leader nodded, moved by Evan's wish, and declared that Leary would be protected by the entire tribe from this day forward. The final scene settled under the rising moon. Evan walking toward the village with Leary on his shoulders, the Leopard pacing proudly beside him, the Moonpride warriors following behind in silent respect, the villagers watching with awe, whispering stories of the human who fought like fire and saved the heir who should have died. And as Leary leaned her head against Evan's, glowing softly with peace, the tribe understood that everything changed the moment one human jumped into the river to save a tiny child no one else would touch. His courage did not just save lives, it reshaped the destiny of an entire people.